introduce myself. Let me introduce myself. My name is John Sapogas. I'm Director of Award Pre-Proposal Support at the Research Foundation, and I welcome everyone here today. Looks like we have a large group. We've done a good job in advertising, letting people know what we're doing. Those of you who are familiar with me, I'm Director of the Award, the Office of Award Pre-Proposal Support at the Research Foundation. The office is primarily focused on supporting faculty in their research development efforts, sponsored project development efforts, not necessarily research, education, curriculum development, all the other activities involved with external funding for university support. One of those activities that my office is responsible for involves providing faculty, students, administrators with access to information on funding opportunities that are available. We do this by contracting with outside vendors. One of those vendors is Pivot. We are very fortunate to have a customer success manager from Pivot today, Robert Laurie, to do this presentation today. The focus is primarily on administrators. Now, Pivot has a lot of bells and whistles in it, a lot of activities to help faculty search for research, but there are also a tremendous number of administrative functions that one can use, especially if you're a grants officer or other administrator who has administrative rights. And Robert is going to discuss those with us today. I ask that if you have any questions, you submit them through the chat box. Maybe we can have some direct questions at the end after Robert is through with his presentation. We'll open it up to actual questions from the audience. But in the meantime, if you have an urge to submit a question, please send it through the chat box. Without further ado, let me turn it over to, I know he's got a lot of territory to cover today. He's going to give us a nice broad overview of these administrative functions. Robert Laurie.
Thanks, John. Appreciate that. If I could just confirm that you can see my screen, this should be a PowerPoint.
Yes.
Yep, we see it.
Okay, I'll blow it up a little bit. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for taking the time out today to join us. As John mentioned, we're going to cover some of the admin functions today of Pivot. And he talked about the bells and whistles. We will touch on some of the critical bells and whistles today, in the understanding and knowledge that what we don't get to today, perhaps, we'd be happy to revisit at a later point. And anything that we do touch today, it will be mostly through a live demo, but anything that we touch today or talk about today can be reinforced later in smaller group sessions, if you wish, or one-on-one sessions, taking a deep dive at particular functions in Pivot. I thought it would be useful, though, just to begin by describing Pivot, what Pivot is. It is largely, its core function is that it is a global resource for you and your researchers to find funding opportunities. In addition to that, each of these funding opportunities, by the way, is not just scraped off a website and automatically uploaded to Pivot. Every funding opportunity, before it's loaded into Pivot, is hand curated, hand edited. We have a very active and smart content team that evaluates every single opportunity, makes sure that all the pertinent information is available before it's uploaded into Pivot, and critically adds at least one Pivot keyword or phrase to that funding opportunity before it's uploaded into Pivot. These Pivot keywords and phrases play a great deal in driving search consistency within Pivot, but also allow your researchers to receive, once they've claimed their profile, to receive what we call weekly funding alerts or advisor alerts. And that is simply the system, Pivot, presenting to your researchers by way of a weekly email a list of new opportunities that were uploaded within the past week that may be of interest to them based on what's in their researcher profile. So that's a little bit about Pivot. I will point out at the very top of that first slide, we've got the URL there. Pivot.proquest.com is how you access Pivot. Although this we work for Ex Libris, it is an Ex Libris product, which is in turn part of ProQuest. So pivot.proquest.com is where you go if you haven't been there already. What is Pivot? I'm just going to flip through these very, very quickly. Anytime we start announcing numbers about Pivot, they are old news because they're out of date immediately. As soon as we publish them, things change. We upload in live time new opportunities to Pivot every day, every hour. So when we talk about 23,000 active and constantly updated funding ops, be aware that that will vary from one day to the next. When you do a search in Pivot, you're only searching the database of live, active funding opportunities whose deadlines have not expired yet. As a deadline expires, that opportunity drifts away and will not be featured in any search that you do. The dollar values, that is a global database, so we'll just be aware that it is a global database. So it includes funding opportunities for people in Switzerland, Sweden, France, wherever you wish. You can establish a US administrator for your own institution. You can establish global search settings that reduce some of the clutter, if you like, that your researchers might be faced with when they do their own individual searching within Pivot, or they themselves as individuals can easily apply specific filters and facets to drill down and really hone in on opportunities that are pertinent and relevant to them. We work with a large group of funding sponsors, over 13,000, all the way from US government down to private foundations, corporations, you name it, we've got it. And we also have a large active group of researcher profiles, yours included as researchers. You should have a profile in Pivot that allows you as an individual researcher perhaps to discover potential collaborators either within your own institution or across CUNY or across the world, and allows you to be discovered as a researcher by others. And we also recently is a relative term, within the last year or so, we added a new database in Pivot called Previously Awarded Grants. Doesn't help you find new funding opportunities, but can inform you as to where the money went in the past. And that might help you in your thinking about applying for a new opportunity. So there's just a listing, a summary, if you like, probably out of date by now, of where the opportunities are coming from. This is a number of opportunities. This is not dollar value. You'll see then the different types of sponsors that we have available in Pivot, and those are the sponsors that we work with. Here's the opportunity types. You'll see at the bottom, the vast majority of the opportunities in Pivot are for pure research, but our funding opportunities database also includes things like equipment grants or travel and things like that. So anything that's listed in there. And we just threw this in here just to give you a sense. This is the company that you keep. These are some of the better, these are alive, active Pivot institutions in the US and in Canada today. And if you want to think more globally, these are some of the more well-known names across the world that are using Pivot today as we speak. So that said, that's just a very, very brief introduction to Pivot. I want to show you one more slide before we dive right into the live demo on Pivot. And this is today's focus, as John mentioned. Today, what we're focused on are some of the administrative functions that you as Pivot administrators can do to really help your research community, to engage with them, to make things easier for them in Pivot, and also to do perhaps some of the heavy lifting in Pivot. You as a Pivot administrator may be charged with finding opportunities on behalf of others. What we've got there then, what we're looking at right now, is a big, big, long list, too big, and I need to cut this down. But these are some of the things that Pivot administrators can do with appropriate privileges in Pivot. Your Pivot users, your end users, the non-administrators, will find Pivot fairly, we hope, intuitive to use in terms of searching for funding, drilling down, targeting funding sources, saving searches, sharing funding opportunities with others within Pivot, things like that. You as Pivot administrators can do some of the heavy lifting on their behalf using some of the tools that we're going to look at today. You'll notice that the first one up there that a Pivot administrator can do is customize the user interface and newsletters. And that's important as a segue into a live demo then of Pivot. What I'm going to point out to you is that this is a demo account. When you log into your institution's Pivot environment, it may look a little bit different. You're somebody or some admin, or perhaps you yourself at your individual school may have customized the user interface by adding the school's logo, the school's colors, and also down here, taking advantage of this whole section of Pivot. If you follow my highlight on this homepage, you'll see that tips and resources section that is completely customizable by you as Pivot administrators, an opportunity for you to post institutional specific messaging to your researchers. It's up to you what you put in there. You can include training schedules, for example. You can put in reminders. You can put in office hours. You can put in links to other to websites, department websites, interesting documentation, things like that. So if you need help as a Pivot administrator with customizing your institution's Pivot interface, the homepage, please let me know. I can walk you through that, and if we have time today at the end, we can perhaps show you some examples of that also. Yeah, I need to pause just to take a small sip here. Bear with me. Okay, so we are logged into Pivot. I am logged in as a Pivot administrator to this demo account. I know that, you can tell that because I have access to this in the top right. If you follow my mouse, you'll see the admin functionality, the admin gears, if you like. That's the admin. That's a tab to access the admin dashboard. I'll make the point very quickly. You will never be presented or see the support button. That is for internal Ex Libris use only. But if we visit the admin dashboard very quickly, this is where things can happen as an admin. This is where you can make things happen, where you can look at reports on the left-hand side, where unfortunately don't have time today to spend much time in there. But some of the other things we will hit on today include creating an embedded search under tools. We'll also take a look at creating a newsletter. We've talked a little bit about custom branding. This is the section under institutional settings where you can enter a little sandbox, a little playground. And here's where you add your institution's logos. You upload them from your local machine. You can change the colors. Perhaps your marketing or IT team can give you the color values for your institution. You can get rid of the gray austere building on the homepage, replace it with a nice campus picture, things like that. And here's the little the section that I highlighted earlier, this tips and resources section on the homepage. What we're presenting you here is a little mini word processor that allows you to really spiffy up and put in your own institutional specific messaging. When we rolled out this customizable interface over a year ago, we got immediate feedback saying it was great. They loved the visuals. You can make this look like it belongs to your institution with your logos and your colors and so on. But more than that, the folks that adopted it early and that are still adopting it really enjoy and take advantage of this section. Because prior to this, there was only a couple of little spots in Pivot where you as a research administrator could speak to or push out institutional messaging to your researchers. This new section is something that you can use to your advantage, again, to promote training schedules, office hours, reminders, links to other internal websites and things like that. So again, I can't emphasize enough how much positive feedback we got about this particular thing. When you make changes here, you get a chance to preview them before you save them and upload them. And so on. So I just wanted to point that out, that is an ongoing thing that we can help you with. I know that some of the CUNY schools have done this already. If you're looking at this, and if perhaps you're a new admin at a school and you need help with the custom branding, please let me know. So we'll revisit the admin dashboard in a little while, but I want to focus on a couple of things. And one of the important things that most admins do, or many admins do at Pivot institutions, is they do some of the heavy lifting on behalf of others. And by that, I mean that they find funding opportunities for a targeted group or groups of people. You may have a faculty member or a team come to you and say, hey, we need to know about funding opportunities either from a specific sponsor or on a particular topic or of a certain type. All of these things you can do yourself. You can go find these opportunities, and then we're going to show you today what you can do, or tools that you can use in Pivot to share what you found with targeted groups of people. So that's where we're going to head. Your first stop in doing that then is to start a funding search. You can start your funding search from the homepage. We're in the Pivot homepage right now. You can't miss it. It says search for funding. You can search funding opportunities right here. It's very much like a Google search. I hate to use that term, but that's exactly what it is. If you start a Google search, it's going to start searching the funding opportunities database immediately and bring you back some results. We do strongly advise you, though, that if you are keenly interested and really serious about doing a funding search, that you take the one click and go to the funding tab. And the reason for that is the code that's underneath this page in terms of funding searches is a little bit better, a little bit more involved, if you like. This is really where you should start your funding search. You'll search for funding opportunities on behalf of others. There are various ways you can start your funding search. The glitzy way is perhaps to use this interactive wheel, the funding discovery wheel with browse by keyword. This is a note back to what I said earlier about every opportunity is hand edited. Our content editors apply at least one pivot, keyword, or phrase to every opportunity before it's uploaded into Pivot. You can browse through this wheel using your mouse. You can skip through it. The inner circles are describe the gross topical areas, if you like, or subject areas. This is the science area, a lot of opportunities in there, of course. If I go here, this is education, still a lot of money, still a lot of opportunities here. Keep in mind that what we're looking at here is the global database, not just US-based grants and so on. But it is, you can start your search from here. If you use your mouse and wander out through this, out the circles and go to the outer limits, for example, and then click. So I'm going to click on engineering education, and it will immediately do a funding search and bring back search results just like this. So it brought back 79 results. You can start your funding search from there. Maybe not the most elegant way to start a funding search, so we'll show you other ways to start your funding search. If I go back to the funding tab, you can, this again is our Google page. You can type anything you want. I'm just going to use a term that I've used that's cached in my browser here, food insecurity, and it will bring back today 28 results. We're going to take a harder look at what this result set, not this specific one, but what this page means and what you can do with it and options that you have there. But again, that's one way of doing a search. You can also search by funder. Mentioned earlier that we have 13 or 14,000 different funders or sponsors that we work with. Here, if you know the sponsor's name, like Robert Wood Johnson Foundation or Alfred P. Sloan, NIH, these are the ones that are cached in my browser. You can simply type the funder name and we'll do that. Let's look for Robert Wood Johnson opportunities today. We'll do a search. Searching by funder brings back these 60 results today. If you do that same search tomorrow, I don't know, but it may change because we may be uploading right now a new funding opportunity, or one of these funding opportunities today may have a deadline today and it would be gone by tomorrow. So still on the focus of how do you start a funding search, search all fields, search by funder, use the wheel, or search by keyword. And that's the tab I just clicked on there. This is, again, hearkening back to the pivot keywords. Every opportunity has a pivot keyword, a phrase, or multiples applied to it. These are used, the pivot keywords and phrases are used by Pivot to send out weekly funding alerts, if you remember, that go to your researchers who have claimed a profile, and that simply is presenting them with an email of potential new opportunities that they might be interested in, that might be relevant to their profile. Searching by keyword, again, you can start typing. If I start typing the word artificial, Pivot then will try and autocomplete. And now what we're seeing is our first glimpse at the Pivot controlled vocabulary, the Pivot keywords and phrases, everything that you're seeing there, although it doesn't show up very well, perhaps in a shared screen, but everything that you're seeing there you're starting to get a sense of what the Pivot keywords are. Another way you can do that is to back out of that, and rather than start typing, we're still in search by keyword, is to drop down on the arrow on the right-hand side of the search box, and now you see the Pivot keyword hierarchy, if you like. So if you're focused on education, then you can expand that and drill down into it a little bit more. And every time you see the little butterfly, you know that there's something underneath that. So you can really drill down, get to where you want to be. If you're looking for grants today or opportunities today on basic skills education, click into it, it drops it down here. It makes it part of the search that you're about to do. You can add to that by saying, I'm also interested in curriculum development today. Now we've got 2 search functions going on, and now I can hit my search button here and it will bring back the results based on that. I will point out that however you start your search, however you refine it, and we're going to start refining this in just a second, however you drill down and hone into it, Pivot always repeats back to you your search criteria along the top. And that's maybe important because there are, in some searches, if you keep drilling down and applying new facets and filters and criteria to them, you get to a good page and you kind of wonder, okay, how did I get here? You can always use the breadcrumbs along the top to just keep you up to date about how you got here. So funding searches, numerous ways, different ways that you can start your funding search. You determine the best way to start a funding search. I'm just going to start one today, and we'll get to a result set. Let's look for robotics today. So I'm just going to click on the search, and it brings back 105 results. So we have 105 results based on the fairly loose generic term robotics. On the left-hand side, Pivot offers always these dynamic filters. These are built-in filters pertinent to this specific search or the results that you just got. Of the 105 results that we have here, if you look at the filters on the left-hand side, we can tell immediately that 65 of them, for example, are for that first funding type, pure research, project grants and innovation. So you can apply that filter immediately just by clicking it, and it will drill down now and bring us to the 65 results. So use the filters on the left-hand side to really hone in and target your search. Drill down, drill down, drill down. And a very general idea is when you're searching for funding, we think it's best that you start wide or broad and then drill down, drill down, drill down, using either these built-in filters that we're offering you here, which is a whole host of different options that you have, or you can always go wherever you are in your search. You can always go to the refine search page. If I click into that, and here's where you get to apply your local knowledge and expertise and what you're looking for today. You can add keywords to it along the top. Robotics is what we started with. You can specify that you, for example, that you're only looking for opportunities that are more than a certain dollar value. You can specify today that you're only looking for opportunities whose deadlines are coming up within the next 30 or 90 or 180 days and so on. So I'm not going to click into each of these, but use this, the refined search or the advanced search page at any point within your search to further refine, to apply your own filters, your needs, express your needs to Pivot. What are you looking for? The top half of this page, by the way, is opportunities for you to include or add more criteria. The bottom half of the page includes the same categories, but it's an exclude function. So here's where you can really, you may have done applied a couple of different filters. Now you're getting close to the end of your targeted search, and for example, you might want to say today that you're not interested in opportunities that are specifically for undergraduate students. And if you invoke that filter, it pops it in over here. And then by clicking search, you apply that filter to exclude any of the opportunities that were on the list that we started with that were targeted specifically by the sponsor for undergraduate students only. So we're back, we dropped one, we're down to 64 results, I think is where we are right now. You can continue to apply filters or refine your search as you wish. I want to get to a list that's a little bit smaller. So let me just apply a filter at random. I'm going to say collaboration opportunities and networking just for fun. So this is for illustrative purposes only. Let me go to non-US government and we'll keep trying. So now this is a more manageable group, if you like. Now, I want you to think that you've done your due diligence. You've applied your local knowledge, your research expertise. You know what you're looking for. You get to a point where, okay, this is great. This is the kind of stuff that group wanted me to find. Now, what do you do as a Pivot administrator? What can you do to share these opportunities with the group or the groups that you've been asked to search on behalf of? Well, one thing you want to do perhaps is make sure that each opportunity is pertinent and relevant to what you're looking for. You do that simply by either blowing up a little magnifying glass to get a little bit more information about each opportunity before we're going off the page. That's great. But if you really want to see each opportunity and it's in its glory and with all the details, you simply click into it. And then you get to what we call the opportunities details page. This is a typical page of providing you with the information that the sponsor provided to us on what this opportunity is all about. You can see it's got the key information that's needed, the amounts, the funder, the website, the country of the funder, who's at the eligibility criteria, and so on, the abstract that was provided to us. More importantly, in terms of searching or future searching, what's listed at the bottom are the pivot keywords that our content team applied to this opportunity before it was uploaded into the Pivot database. And this is important because if you are charged with finding opportunities on behalf of others, you might want to use this pivot keyword, and you'll subconsciously almost become aware of what the pivot keywords are. But you can hop from this individual opportunities by clicking one of these funding or one of these keywords or phrases. You can hop from here. So we started, we did a search, but now if you hop here, I could click on disease control, for example, and it's going to run off and do a new search now for disease control, because you thought that the opportunity that you were looking at was one that you thought was very relevant, very pertinent to what you've been charged with and looking for at this time. So just mention that you can invoke a new search from here if you like, if you think that this opportunity is very typical of what you wanted to find, and so on. But we're going to go back now to our list of 21 results. You as a pivot administrator can take various actions from here to share all of these results by clicking that button at the top alongside the 21, or by sharing individual opportunities within the results set. You have options as to how you can convey these or get these pushed out, either within Pivot or outside of Pivot, and present them to the group that asked you to search for funding on their behalf. So either by clicking all of them, the top box, or by any one or multiples of them, any number of them, you'll start to see that there are boxes that appear, options that appear along the top. Track, share, and export are the first three. I should mention that track, share, and export, these options are available not just to Pivot administrators. Your end users, your faculty, your researchers, when doing their own searches for themselves, can find opportunities like this, and they can then track them, put them in a folder that lands in their homepage under tracked ops. And what that is simply telling Pivot to keep an eye on it for you. And it will send you then reminders. You can set the reminder to be notified that the deadline is coming up in 2 months or 4 months, but also if the opportunity changes. If a deadline moves from anticipated to confirmed, for example, you get a ping. You can, as an end user and as an admin, you can share the marked opportunities that you see here. If you hit the share button, it simply brings up a little thing where you can punch in email addresses or start typing somebody's name that's within your same institution, send an accompanying message in the email that's going to go out. The message might be, hey, look what I found. Let's talk about this at our next session or meeting or whatever you want to say. If you're sending it to multiple people, you can let each recipient see who else got it and so on. Or you can push this opportunity into someone else's tracked opportunities list in their home folder. So if you find an opportunity or more than one opportunity that you think is very, very relevant, pertinent to a specific individual within your community, then you can use that option to put this opportunity into their tracked ops folder, if you like, and they will then start to receive reminders of deadlines on that opportunity and an email if and when any information about the opportunity changes. It's simply an email mechanism within Pivot, still contained everything within Pivot. Pivot would send then an email to whoever you designate, whether it's one or more people in here. I will mention very quickly that if you find you're doing this repeatedly with sharing with a specific group of people, put these people in a distribution group. In your home page, you'll see a section in the middle at the bottom called groups. You can simply create very quickly a distribution group that you can then use. It just helps the sharing process a little bit. So everybody can track, share. You can also export. You can take opportunities out of Pivot, the ones that are marked here that we marked on this page. You can track them or share them and export them in these different formats: HTML, Excel, ASCII text, tag text, Word doc. And you can also specify here what fields you want to export in that particular format that you've chosen. I will leave it up to you to decide when the export function might be useful to you. It might be useful to export out to a CSV file that you can then manipulate in Excel to your own needs, and or push it into a separate application further down the line if you like. So track, share, export are available to everybody. The Curate button is what we're going to take a minute to talk about. Curate is available to Pivot administrators only. The idea here is that you get a good set of results that you know would be useful for a particular group. And let's mark all of them just to make sure that we get them all cut. When you curate a list, if you hit the Curate button, we'll show you the mechanics of it. But basically what you're doing, you're telling Pivot to take all the opportunities that you've marked here, and I'm just going to call this Curate demo. You give it your list a name and you create a new list. We'll just go through the mechanics of it, please. Yep, just confirm that that's what you want to do. Create a curated list. And Pivot processes it, and it just returns you back to your page, and you think, okay, what happened? Well, what happened is you now have in your home page, in your curated ops folder, you now have a curated list of these opportunities, and I think we just called it the CUNY curated demo or something like that, right? I will come back to that in a second. We're going to look at that curated list and what you can do with it. But before we get to that, there's another option that you can take as a Pivot administrator, which is to make this a saved search and then publish it as a curated search. Everybody, however, not just Pivot administrators, can use the save search function that you'll find above there underneath the search criteria or filters that have been used. You can make this a saved search. This is different from curating a list. When you make a saved search, we'll make this CUNY saved search. We'll give it a name. I would advise you to keep this. The default is for you to receive weekly email alerts telling you about new opportunities that have been added to here. Let's go through the mechanics. We'll save it as a curated, as a saved search. We've done two things with this list of opportunities here. Number one, we made a curated list out of it. Number two, we've made it a saved search. Everybody, not just end users, can do the saved search, but only admins can do the curated search, if you like. The idea of a saved search is that you're telling Pivot to go to look for new opportunities that are added to the Pivot database on a weekly basis that match the search criteria. And that's an important distinction, because when you as an administrator decide between making a curated search or a curated list, which we're going to look at in a second, you decide which might be better. The distinction is quite important, and we'll talk about that in a second. I just clicked into my homepage, my curated ops folder, if you like, and I ignore all the clutter here. I do a lot of demos, so there's a lot going on here. But the first thing that we want to find is my curated search. Oh, my curated list, apologies. Well, let me back up for a second. The first option that we did was to curate a list. That curated list now resides under my curated lists down here. There it is. It's called CUNY curated demo. We're going to come back to that. The second option that we did, we made a saved search. So rather than go to my curated folder, I want to go to my saved searches. I find what I just saved, which is called CUNY saved search. And if you go to options on that, and we're kind of skipping through things very quickly, but again, we can revisit all of this, take a deeper dive in any of these functions. The option that you have as a Pivot administrator is to publish this as a curated search. And basically, when you do that, you are then taking a crucial action that you need to take in order for you to take this list out of Pivot and get it in front of people where you know they're going. And that may be on a web page, it may be via a newsletter that you generate from Pivot, or it may be an online document somewhere, or anywhere you want, anywhere you can link to that list. So I made it a curated search. We've got two things going on now. I'm going back to my curated ops folder. And let me pay attention to the chat. So I'll address this question. Yes, we've still got a lot to describe about this, but the question is, the curated search will continue to update itself based on the search terms, yes, as opposed to the curated list, which is static. Yes, you got that right. That's exactly what's going on. With a curated list, you need to manually go find new opportunities that you want to add to that curated list. With a curated search, you rely on the search criteria, the facets and filters that you put into that search. You rely on that finding new opportunities from the new to add to the save to the curated search. Exactly right. Perfect. With both curated searches and curated lists, what I want to show you is what you might do with them once you've got them searched. So I'm going to focus now on my CUNY saved search. This is the one that we just saved. We made a saved search first, and now then we went and published it as a curated search. If I click that CUNY saved search, one thing I want to show you very quickly is that for every curated search and every curated list that you create in Pivot, what Pivot provides for you are a couple of options along the top. So you click into your saved search or your curated search or list, and you've got two options. You can choose to display, and the little infographic pop up here. By selecting display, basically what you're doing is you're making this list that you've created, making it available to everybody at your institution when they log into Pivot. They would go find it in their curated ops folder under public curated list, which again is at the very bottom of my list here. So it's one thing you can do with either your curated search and or your curated list is display them, make it available to your users within Pivot. The trick there, though, is that they have to know to find it. They have to go find it, if you like. But another thing that Pivot offers you here is a link to this list. It's the little icon. It's kind of, we could beef that up a wee bit. When you click link to this list, what it generates is a permanent URL, pivot.proquest.com/curated_ops, and then a number. This is a pointer at that specific list. You can simply copy paste that pointer, that URL, and put it anywhere. You can put it in an online document. You can include it in an email that you do outside of the Pivot system. You can, anywhere you can post a URL that's relevant that people will find, you can put that. I'll show you one example of that at University of Arizona. I've just flipped over to a live page at University of Arizona. I'm in development, find funding / external funding. It's a live page where they've got all sorts of stuff going on. What they've got down here are these Pivot curated opportunity searches by category. Each of these bullets is a link back. It's this URL that they have copied here and pasted into the HTML code on this web page. Each of these bulleted lists points back to a Pivot curated list or search that one of their admins has generated for them. The idea here is that their researchers, their faculty, will, in their normal day-to-day, be aware of this page. They will land on this page. And now what we've done then is we've taken the work that you've done in generating funding opportunities for targeted groups, and it could be by subject, agriculture and food science, arts and humanities. It could be by type of opportunity, fellowships. It could be by, or for postdocs only. You can, however you want. There's one for young and early investigators. Each of these, you can quickly establish and build your own lists in Pivot. When I click on this list, it will take me into Pivot, but it will not show me this list unless I'm an authenticated Pivot user at University of Arizona. So don't worry about using these links. If you're worried about exposing your great work to the whole world, they will see what list you've generated, but unless they will only have full access to it in Pivot if they're an authenticated Pivot user. So that's one way that you can take this URL, this link for each curated search or curated list and display it on a web page. I'll show you one more thing on this before we come back to what you can do. A couple of other tools that Pivot has. If I go to my Twitter account, I'm not a huge Twitter fan. I used to use it in a previous life more than I do now. But we know now that the University of Pittsburgh, they have a Twitter handle, I think you call it. And they pump out stuff to their community, their research community, using that Twitter account. And you can see that what they routinely pump out are links to curated lists within Pivot. They do this on a regular basis. So this is for the latest, this is their latest and greatest natural and physical science research funding opportunities list. They've pushed it simply into a Pivot feed. So use your imagination as to where you think you might, how you might best find and get lists of Pivot opportunities in front of your researchers. So that link that you've got is available to you from any curated search or curated list that you have. Let's find the curated list that we did, the CUNY curated demo. It's the same thing. And again, I'll come back to the question that we had earlier, and thanks for that question, because it's worth repeating. A curated list is something that you need to manually update. You can delete, and you can, if you think, well, that doesn't belong on here, because it's a curated list, you can highlight or check off a couple of opportunities and delete them from your curated list. Your curated search, on the other hand, the one that we were just looking at, relies on the search criteria that you established to build the initial search. And based on these search criteria, new opportunities will be added to it automatically. The only way that you can modify a curated search or impact what opportunities show up on it is to go find your saved search that you made and modify or change the search criteria, alter the facets, add new facets or filters, or take away facets and filters if it's too narrow. So very quickly, what we've shown you is how to build a curated list, a curated search, also how you can find the links to these, the pointers to these, the URLs. One example, how you can use them here, put them on a web page, bullets, however you want to do it, and or use social media as best you can. You can also just push them into an email that you want to send out, put them in online documents that you know your researchers are going to anyway, things like that. Other options that you have for taking your good work and pushing it out to your research community are found in the admin dashboard. And that's where I just clicked into my admin dashboard. We're going to look at a couple of things today. Time is running out on us, so we'll run through this fairly quickly, but hopefully you'll get the sense of what the opportunities are. One thing that you can do with your curated lists and or your curated searches is create what's called an embedded search. This speaks specifically to you taking your list that you've created, whether it be a search or a list, and pushing it out into a web page that you have access to or control over. And again, the idea here is that you're taking your work and trying to get it in front of the people for whom it's relevant. So when you create an embedded search, we'll go through the mechanics of this very quickly. You have to give it a name. The second step is a critical step. You have to choose what content you want to share in this embedded search. And that is going to be either one of your curated lists or one of your curated searches. So when you click into that, we know that we created one. So we'll make it the CUNY saved search that we made. You then get to choose how it is displayed on the page, the web page that you're going to put it into. And I would say deadline soonest to latest. Let's put the upfront ones up front. And then when you hit the save button, it's going to process for a couple of seconds, and I'll show you what's happening here. And then we'll show you the end result. Number one, it generates in this gray bar code. Again, just like you had to copy paste the links, the URLs to your curated search or your curated list, this is code that you copy and then hand off to IT, or if you're comfortable doing it yourself and have access to a web page, put it into, embed it in the HTML code in that web page. You simply highlight it all, copy it, and then paste it where it needs to go. Pivot also shows you here what it's going to look like on your web page. It's going to look exactly like this. It's going to have your some opportunities listed. You can scroll down. This is all going to be active on your page also. And it gives you, unlike the static link, if you like, that we looked at our University of Arizona, this one affords your users who find this or who come to it a couple of, or one specific functionality, if you like. For each opportunity, they can expand that. They can click on details and it blows up a little bit. So they can read more about the individual opportunity before they commit to going to Pivot to read the entire record in Pivot. If they want to, when they've read the details part of each of these opportunities and they say, oh, that one's interesting, let me go see the full details. They click view the full details of this record in Pivot, and it will zoom them back into Pivot to the details, the opportunity detail page for that opportunity. What they can't do, unless they're an authenticated user, however, is click on view more details in Pivot RP, much like, so this link here, view more details, this is the link for the entire list that we called CUNY demo. And again, only those that are authenticated users at your organization, at your institution, would have access to the list. So you're not going to hang out your list completely. It is there. It is quite a glossy, glitzy thing to do. I'll show you just one example of this in real world, live. University of Alabama, Birmingham. I know it's not really a sister or a comparable institution to you, but Chelsea down there really took this to heart. This is, again, a live page at UAB/research/home/funding opportunities. And they've got a lot going on in here, a lot of stuff going on in here. But what they have is a pivot search widget, which we'll have to skip over for today. But if you look here, what they've managed to do with a little bit of IT help, these are all individual embedded searches. Just like this. This is where it's coming from. They've copied pasted the code for each of their embedded searches, and with a little bit of manipulation and IT help, they've got these embedded searches to be side by side and also underneath each other. And again, this is how it works. So we're live in their environment right now. If I choose this first one, I click the details of it, I get to read more about the opportunity. I could then click, even though I'm not in UAB's Pivot environment, I could click to full view details of this record, this individual op, because the record belongs to everybody. What I couldn't not do is view all the details of the entire list that they've prepared here, because I'm not an authenticated UAB user, if you like. So that's one thing that you can do to really grab or push these out to get your users, your researchers' attention, either by putting them in a web page like this, linking back to the entire list, or use the embedded search function if you wanted to make it a little bit more glossy or glitzy, if you like, but also practical because it provides information here, more information here to your users before they have to commit by clicking the button that takes them back into Pivot to see the entire opportunity. So we've talked about a couple of things. We've talked about whether you know it or not. We've created curated searches and lists. We then showed you how from your home page in your curated ops folder, you go find each of these and you can find the link to the URLs. That would be this type of example. We've also talked about how if you go into your admin dashboard, you can create an embedded search. And that was the second thing that we showed you. That's this one. The third thing that we want to just, with time allowing, just talk about very briefly today, much as you did with an embedded search, you can also create a Pivot newsletter or multiple Pivot newsletters. And the thing about a newsletter is that it pretty much, when it pulls up, it might look familiar to you. It's very much the same form as is used for the embedded search, with a couple of exceptions. Number one, you need to give your newsletter a name. CUNY News, for example, and then here again you choose from your lists of curated searches or lists, you choose what content you want to share. There's a CUNY search. The thing about a newsletter, though, it can include more than one. So we could use the Curated saved search, the saved search we made, we could also use the saved, the curated list that we made. Again, you get to choose how it's presented. But again, with not again, but with the newsletter, you have the opportunity here. It's the same little mini word processor that we use for the customization page. Spiffy up your newsletter, make it look great, and then send yourself a preview email to see what it looks like. The thing about a newsletter, though, and I'm having to rush right now, is that you can only send a newsletter to groups. So go back to your home page, look at groups. US Pivot admins can create either private or public groups. If you create a public group of the people, you need to have that targeted group set up before you send your newsletter out. You can then schedule the newsletter to go out on a repeating basis, weekly or monthly, send it on a specific date. Once you're ready, you make it actively published and make it go. The thing about any and all of these, whether it's the link, the bullet, or whether it's the embedded search, or whether you're making a newsletter, whatever content is created in there will always be the most up-to-date version of that search or that list. Whenever somebody clicks on one of these bullets here, it will then refresh that entire list for everybody, if you like. So with a curated search, you don't have to worry about updating it manually. With a curated list, you do have to worry about updating it manually. You have more control over the individual opportunities that are on a curated list. A curated search, you have control over the search criteria. John, I'm going to pause. I need to take a little sip here. I wonder, I haven't seen any more questions coming in there. Maybe there are some more questions.
Maybe we can open it up to questions.
Yeah, please, let's do that. Yeah.
Is there anyone who would like to step in and jump in and ask any questions? I mean, it's clearly, I mean, you could see that there's a lot of, there are a lot of functions here, especially those curated lists provide us with a lot of opportunities, you know, because you have CUNY colleges who are focused on certain specific activities. For example, School of Public Health could create a curated list on public health and put it on your website. School of Engineering at CCNY could do that as well. I mean, I know the functions at ASRC. There are specific functions there, neuroscience, they can do it as well. So you could see that the value of this. I mean, I've toyed with the idea of putting it on the RF website, but it just, it would be huge if I put it on the RF website. It probably makes more sense putting these curated lists on your individual websites, your, you know, individual colleges' websites. So we do have a question here.
Yeah, the question is, does Pivot offer any support for working with keywords? I had a faculty member who said her recurring searches did not seem to identify her specific research topic. So there's any number of things going on there. I wonder if the person asking the question can expand a little bit on recurring searches. Are these the, is that the weekly funding alert that they're getting? Or is it saved search results that they're getting? There is a distinction. And we can take this offline later if you wanted to. We can address that individually. The weekly funding alerts, I believe. So if the weekly funding alerts, very quickly, a user comes into Pivot and claims their profile. It's a researcher profile that our separate team within ProQuest has loaded information about that particular user. When the user claims their profile, basically tells Pivot, this is me, then that fires off what we're talking about here, the weekly funding alerts, which is simply a match between the new opportunities that our content team loads every week and matching that against a person's profile. The way to tighten that, if you like, to make it more relevant, or to try and encourage the individual user to look for opportunities in Pivot that they agree are of particular interest. Find the keywords that are associated with these opportunities, then go to their profile, edit their profile, and add these same Pivot keywords to their profile. And that should tighten up the matching process. The second thing they can do is, rather than just rely on the weekly funding alert, is take a more proactive step. Do a couple of searches in Pivot and find and drill down, get to a point where they're looking at results that they agree are relevant to them, and make these one search, two search, however many searches they want to do, turn these into saved searches. And that pretty much does the same thing. From then on, they'll get supplied with opportunities that match not just their profile, which can be a big, vast, amorphous thing, but they'll get matches based on the saved search, which tends to be more targeted, more relevant, more pertinent. So taking that second step of conducting or saving a couple of saved searches in Pivot will allow them to not just rely on the weekly funding alert that they get, but also they'll get pings on the more targeted saved searches that they themselves have created, if that makes sense. Yeah.
So if there aren't any more questions, I think we need to end this. Robert and I think, have to run to another meeting. But
yeah.
let me just ask you one question, Robert. Will you allow our administrators or the individuals who are viewing us today to contact you if they have any additional questions?
Absolutely. Yes. And let me, if they don't know already, I'm going to pop my email address into the chat. Absolutely. That's exactly what I knew we would never be able to cover everything today. So if anybody wants to take a deeper dive into any or all of this, if you want to look at newsletters in more detail, if you want to look at embedded searches in more detail, if you're worried about curated searches versus curated lists and so on, you can get lost in the weeds sometimes. So please just let me know, and we can either set up a one-to-one with an institution, or bring together 2 or 3 institutions that have the same questions, and we can do maybe a 30-minute on newsletters, a 30-minute on embedded searches, things like that. Absolutely. Yeah.
All righty. Let me thank everyone for attending. Robert, thank you for an excellent presentation.
Great stuff. Thanks.
Thank you all for attending. I hope you found this webinar as interesting, as informative as I had. So thank you. Goodbye. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot for your time today. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.